Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us to this special mental health live streaming event. Today, we're opening up a space for an honest, thoughtful conversation around mental health, a topic that, of course, touches us all in different ways. I am super excited to be joined by Jenna Stanfield, our VP of Growth and Strategic Partnerships. Beyond her role, Jenna has a deep passion and understanding of mental health, as she holds a Master of Arts in Clinical Mental Health Counseling, a Bachelor's in Human Services and Nonprofit Administration, and is a licensed professional counselor. Her blend of business leadership and clinical insight offers a truly unique perspective, of course, making this conversation one you don't want to miss. Whether you're here to learn something new, take a mindful pause, or simply connect, we are very happy that you are with us. Now, remember, if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to leave them in the chat. We will address them at the end of the session. So, without further ado, let's get started. Hi, Jenna.
Hi, Tati. Thanks.
How are you?
Introduction. I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. So let's get started. I have a question to ask you, and it's, what does mental health actually mean?
Okay. Mental health is really just part of being human, right? Same as our physical health is. So when we think of mental health, there's so much stigma around it, right? And a big goal of mine, and I think a lot of folks in the mental health space or just advocates of mental health, is mental health and physical health are two elements of being human, right? So there is not mental health does not equal having bad mental health. It does not equal having good mental health. It is what it is. It's the same as physical health. It's just the stuff you can't see. Right. So when we have a cold, we have snot coming out of our nose, right? We break an arm, we have a cast on it. A lot of times mental health is harder to understand because there is just no physical representation of it. A lot of the times, most of the times, but it's just part of our humanness.
Okay, you mentioned something really important, which was like, okay, there are certain signs you cannot see, right? Now, I want to know, is there a way to identify, some signs or early signs that might indicate that someone might be struggling with their mental health, even if they seem fine?
Yeah, I think there are. I think a big piece of that, though, is difficult because everybody's personalities and their way of interacting is different. So common signs might be noticing somebody having a shift in how they engage, right? So we talk about the workplace. If somebody is typically a bubbly personality, loves to participate in team conversation, likes to raise their hand, you might notice them maybe withdrawing. Maybe their bubbliness is tempered down. On the contrary, you might notice somebody that is trying to overcompensate, right? They want to be involved in everything. And it might look fine, it might look great on the surface, but they're all of a sudden, there's this shift in their personality and they're maybe trying to take on too much. They're trying to engage too much. They might be more irritable in certain settings. What I would say the most evidence is if there's a shift in their personality. If you know somebody and all of a sudden, they're not engaging, or they're engaging overly, or they're irritable with themselves, with others, there might be signs that they're struggling with something.
Okay. So let's just say that we identify those signs, right? How can we support a teammate or perhaps a manager when we start identifying those signs? Like, how can we do that?
I think the biggest thing is not being afraid to have a conversation. I think the reason there's so much stigma around mental health can come from a lot of different variables depending on your cultural background and maybe the length of time you've been in a certain workplace or in a certain community. But I would say, like, ask the question, hey, how you doing? I noticed that in our last meeting, you really didn't talk very much. You doing okay? Right. Hey, I noticed that you've been working nonstop. I've noticed that your Slack green light is on constantly. Are you getting enough rest? Are you taking time for yourself? Right. Just having those conversations, trying to do it not I think a lot of people that sometimes are struggling, they might have a defensiveness to them, right? And so if we say things like, hey, like, are you okay? In a way that maybe makes them, oh gosh, something's wrong, right? But just, hey, I noticed this. I'm wondering, like, do you need some extra rest? Can I assist you in any way? And if they do come at you in a more defensive way, that might be a sign that, hey, they might be struggling more than you might have thought, or you might be onto something.
Yeah. Sometimes we just don't want to ask that question because we don't want, people to feel bad or intimidated, or that we're like judging them, or like we're getting too personal, right? But like sometimes we really need to have those honest conversations, right? And bust certain myths around mental health, right?
Yeah. On your relationship with this person, I think being self-aware of are you this person's manager? Are you this person's colleague, teammate? Where do you how long have you known this person? And I think just being cognizant of things, and maybe you're not the right person to bring it up to them. But maybe there might be somebody else that is the right person. And you might be able to say, hey, manager, I've noticed that Tati has been, a little down lately. Do you think she's okay? Should we check on her?
Yeah. Looking for support definitely helps. Do you have like any tips or recommendations to share with our audience in terms of how they can nurture mental health and take care of themselves?
Yeah, I think one, recognizing that it is just as important as your physical health is a really important thing. I'd say there are different things that work for everybody, but I would say that in general, if you have noticed that you're struggling, and I want to talk, like, there are two most very common mental health struggles that we will often see people go through, right? One is depression, one is anxiety. There's obviously a myriad of different mental health struggles, but those are the two most common you hear people talking about or struggling with. And there's different varieties there's situational depression, right? Maybe you recently went through a breakup. Maybe you lost a loved one. Maybe you lost a job, right? And there's a grief associated to what you're going through. And there's a situational circumstance that is causing this depression, versus there is clinical depression, right? Clinical depression is something that is so hard to really grasp and understand because it has to do with our hormones, or the chemicals, are all of the stuff going on in our brain that we don't necessarily know that much about, right? And we can't always pinpoint the reason. We're just feeling down. Everything could be going great. We just got a promotion, our boyfriend proposed, whatever it might be, right? And everything on the surface might look really good, but shoot, I'm not feeling myself, right? Being able to wrestle with that and maybe seek out help when you're going through something like that, I think is huge. Identifying that, I'm a huge proponent of therapy. Obviously, I've been a therapist for many years, but sometimes it's just a matter of talking to a friend, right, or a loved one before you engage in therapy, depending on your level of self-awareness around your own mental health. On the anxiety side of things, right? The same thing. There is what we would call generalized anxiety. There's things that will cause us to be anxious that we have zero control over, right? Zero control over meaning like, okay, I know that I have a fear of heights. I'm not going to go up on the tallest building and look over. I can control how I handle that, right? There are other situations of anxiety where it's not so evident, right? I might be going into a grocery store and all of a sudden I'm feeling anxious, I'm getting sweaty, my heart is racing. And it's like, I've gone into a grocery store 1,000 times. What is causing this? I have no idea what's causing this, right? That might be more of a generalized clinical anxiety, the same way we've got the clinical depression and clinical anxiety, where it might have more to do with different things going on in our body that we don't have direct control over. Okay, so identifying those things are important. Then if you're struggling, right, let's say that panic attack or heart racing, palms sweaty happens at the grocery store, being able to take a step back and say, what is triggering me? What's going on? Grocery stores don't normally make me feel sweaty, make my heart race. What might be going on? Is there something physical? Have I drank too much coffee today? I'm guilty of drinking too much coffee and putting myself in an anxious situation, right? Is that something that's going on? Or, hey, maybe I'm really stressed at work right now. Maybe I have so much on my plate. And when I walked into that grocery store, the noise, the lights, everything just kind of made my head start spinning, right? Identifying what are some things that are going on in our life that might be causing this, and then saying, what can I do to change? Routines are huge for anxiety. So being able to, bedtime routines. I'm a huge proponent of bedtime routines. When you're in a mental health state that is causing anxiety or even depression, sometimes being able to say, okay, I'm going to set myself a timer, and at 9 o'clock every night, I'm going to go brush my teeth, right? I'm going to wash my face. I'm going to get my book. I'm going to turn off all screens, right? I'm not going to have my phone on, right? I'm going to get in my bed. I'm going to read my book until I am ready to close my eyes and fall asleep. And you're really programmed with that, right? If you guys grew up in a household, I grew up with a mom who was a teacher, and she was very, very big on bedtime routines because she knew how that would prepare us for the next day, right? To go and be a good student. There is something to that I think as adults, we lose. Oh, we don't need that anymore. We don't need a bedtime anymore, right? The truth of the matter is adults sometimes need bedtimes, right? Even more so than little kids growing up. So giving yourself a bedtime.
Like the ritual of the bedtime story with mom and dad, like them read the book to you, and like you just disconnect.
Absolutely.
Right, from everything and connect to this special story, and then just fall asleep.
It creates patterns in our head, right? So I am a huge, I use an app called Calm. There's lots of apps. My favorite one is Calm. There's all sorts of different ones. The reason I like Calm so much is because of their bedtime stories. So they have adult sleep stories, right? Anything, because I did have a mother that read to me before going to bed. Now I'm in my 40s, right? I like to be read to sleep, right? So I listen to the Calm app, and it helps me shut my brain off, right? I have a big job. I do a lot of things. My brain is going here, there, and everywhere all day long. It's hard to stop that just because it's bedtime, right? So the sleep stories are something that gets me out of that headspace of work or relationships worries or money concerns, right? And helps me fall asleep. There's a lot of other things on that app that might work for other people, soundscapes, all sorts of things. Anxiety can keep us up, make us not be able to sleep right, and that will just compile on mental health issues. So bedtime routines are something simple that we could all do, right? To help us have better mental health on a day-to-day basis.
And how about adding physical activities, like maybe going running or riding a bike or just walking around, even inside the house. Sometimes we just sit down for 8 hours straight and
Yeah.
continue working, sometimes even more. And we don't even stand up, right? And walk around and take a deep breath. Sometimes breathing just helps you. Like,
Tati, I think that's a really good point. And I would say that physical activity is huge. It's going to be a natural antidepressant, right? What do I mean by that is that like physical activity is going to activate those chemicals in our brain, right? That help us be happy. Starting your day with a simple walk. It doesn't have to be intense exercise, right? It could be just walking around your house, taking your dog for a walk, being intentional with physical activity, getting up in different times throughout your day, getting out of your desk. I just bought myself a standing desk, right? So I'm trying to do about half and half, sitting, standing.
do you like it?
I do like it. It takes some getting used to. I have to make sure I'm not like favoring one leg or the other leg, but just the act of kind of getting out of the desk, moving your body around is really helpful. Doing things that you enjoy, I think are really important. A lot of people are like, oh, I have to exercise. I have to exercise. And there's just this dread that's around it. Find an exercise that you do enjoy that doesn't feel like something that you're going to dread, right? Some people love yoga. For me, yoga feels boring. I know it's good for me, but it's boring, right? So I like to box, right? I like to box. I like to voice. I'm a very physical person. So for me to kind of get out of my headspace, I need something that's kind of getting me going versus when I'm doing yoga, I want to be meditative. I want to be still, but my brain goes here, there, and everywhere. Physically, it's great for you, but it's not
like,
something that
like
gets me out.
finding something that actually makes you happy, right? It's not like, oh, okay, I have to do this because I have to take care of my mental health. No, it's like, okay, go do more of the things that you enjoy doing. Even if it's like going out for ice cream, go.
Yeah, exactly.
Just go grab some ice cream, right? Play with your pets. I mean, I love being with my cats, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I recently adopted, you would say, a dog.
Yeah.
So, and I just sometimes I just go and visit the dog.
Yeah.
Because the dog doesn't live with me right now. But yeah. And that just gives you like a different perspective, right? It even, fosters creativity when you stop to actually take those breaks and, and you take some me time. It helps you so much. It reactivates you, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think Tati, I think it's important to, in this, all of these things are really, really good for our mental health. There are times, and I think depression is one of these kind of scary little issues that a lot of people deal with. And so what I want to say to those folks out there might be listening, when you are maybe in a really depressive state, these things that Tati and I are talking about might not seem all that easy, right? Like, yeah, just go get ice cream, just go hang out with your dog, just, put together a bedtime routine, right? When you're in a really depressive state, all of those things could seem insurmountable, right? It could feel like, going out to ice cream with a friend could seem simple on the surface, but when you're in a depressive state, could feel like climbing Mount Everest, even making that possible. And so
I really like the fact that you mentioned that, because we have been busting several myths, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the myths that we busted earlier this month was like, people with the myth, people with depression can just snap out of it. It is easy. Yeah. But the fact is, depression is a medical condition, not a choice or a mood, right? So depression requires understanding, support, and often professional treatment, just like any other health issue, right? Any recommendations there, Jenna?
Yeah, I think if you're in a place where calling a friend, texting a friend, going to walk your dog, things that are maybe have been easy for you in the past, or should you feel like they should be easy, feel insurmountable, that is a very good sign that it's time to get help, right? Get help, professional help, seek out a therapist, right? Talk to your general practitioner about, do you need to be on an antidepressant? And and if that feels insurmountable, right? Like, make yourself a checklist, right, of things and say, okay, I'm going to check off one thing today, right? One thing that you could check off can feel like a victory, and sometimes that is a victory. So just making the phone call or getting on Google therapists in my area, right? Maybe you don't start therapy that day, but you Google and know, and the next day say, I'm going to call one of those people on the list, right? One thing, right? Give yourself one thing. If you could do two things, do two things, right? But don't set that expectation that, like, because if you are in that really depressive state, that one thing can be a huge victory, right? But doing more than one thing could feel like it's going to send you over the edge, right?
Yeah, I get it. So in this sense, what would you say to someone that feels guilty or weak for needing mental health support?
Yeah, I think that's a huge issue. And I want to talk a little bit about gender, because I think gender is an important aspect in this. And I'm going to use some generalizations, right? But I want to say that, like, both females and males deal with mental health. And there's some reasons why it's harder for a female in the workplace to admit to vulnerabilities, weaknesses, challenges. And there's other reasons why it's harder for a man to admit to vulnerabilities, weaknesses, or mental health challenges. And they tend to come from societal norms of what is appropriate behavior in the workplace, right? Or what is considered pathological. When I use the word pathological, what that just means is something that's seen as abnormal or outside of the norm of what is right or healthy. Okay, so when we look at what historically has been studied in mental health, a lot of things about just the woman's personality, her hormonal cycles, have been studied as being pathological. And now in modern day, we realize that no, women's behaviors are not pathological. They're just different than men's, right? And so when we bring now to this modern day society where women are involved in all aspects of business, right? They're in technology and construction. There's women that there is still sometimes the stigma of an emotional woman, right? And so women often in the workplace have to be seen as they overcompensate, right? And they have to be strong and they can't be emotional, right? I'm puffing my chest up because that's like this representation of like how often women feel, whether it's true or not, but they feel like they have to be strong and not show emotion, right? On the flip side, many times, men are, they just are strong. Like, so if there is any, they are strong in the society, like they're the strong gender, they don't have mental health issues, they are not emotional, right? And none of that's true. Men sometimes are weak, sometimes are vulnerable, sometimes are emotional, right? But if you're seen as not being a man, or you're seen as being ascribed to a female stereotype of being emotional or losing your cool, right? You can't do that in the workplace, right? So it's two sides of the same coin. And I feel like I maybe got off track a little bit. Tati, can you remind me of your initial question?
Yeah, I was asking how, like what you would say to the person who feels guilty or weak for needing mental health support.
Right. So it's like recognizing maybe where your biases are coming from. Is it coming from a culture of, I have to be the strong man? Men are the leaders. They're not weak. They don't show emotion, right? Recognize that and see if you can expand through that and work through that with other men that you admire and respect. Maybe with women, saying, hey, like, I've noticed that, like, you're amazing in the workplace, you're really strong, but you also are emotional, right? Like, how do you balance that out? it's okay to not ascribe to the cultural stereotypes that we grew up in, right? My brother and my dad, they are both strong, capable men, right? But they'll start talking about something like that's close to them, like, and they will cry, right? And not in a like blubbering, but in a, hey, like, I do remember when I first graduated, both my dad and my brother did a little speech at my graduation ceremony, and they both were crying, and I'm like, it's because they love me, and it was something that was meaningful to them. And not allowing that to be okay, allowing that space for somebody to be emotional regardless of their gender, right, is a beautiful thing. So creating that space, congratulating the man who who just did something that felt like it could have been really difficult for him to do, and as a man, or congratulating the woman for being able to embrace the fullness of what it means to be an emotional woman in the workplace, and being able to still succeed and reach the heights that she is trying to reach.
I see. And may I recommend just saying, hey, it's okay, Jenna. Like, you can talk about it. You need mental health support? Okay. Seek it. It's okay. If you have a fever and you feel really bad and you have a terrible, headache, you go to the doctor. You look for help, right? And it's okay. Well, if you consider that you require mental health support, it's okay. Raise your hand. Talk to your mom if you want to. Talk to your husband. Talk to your significant other. Talk to your best friend. Talk to your work bestie. Like, whoever you feel comfortable talking to, like, do it, right?
Because it's really important. And I think, Tati, even more is that if you're someone who has benefited from mental health resources, whether it be therapy, perhaps an anti-anxiety or antidepressant, I know it's hard, but if you can be open about it, right? So I remember when I first started back at Job City, I was going through something pretty difficult in my life, and I had on my calendar that was public for my team and everybody to see therapy, right? Like, because it was very important, and I scheduled it on my calendar. And there is a vulnerability in that. Obviously, now as a therapist and doing this podcast, you could tell I'm okay talking about it, right? And you don't have to put therapy or counseling on a public format like that if you want to. But if you're open with it with your colleagues and saying, yeah, like I was really struggling last year and I sought out counseling and it was really helpful, that just by being vulnerable yourself creates space for others to be vulnerable, right? Gives people this unspoken permission that it's okay to seek out help. And so that's one of the things I would really encourage those of you that, have already seen the benefits of mental health in your life. Be open with your colleagues, with your friends, with your siblings, your family members. I think that would be huge.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay. I have another question but this time for managers. I actually have two questions. One, how can managers foster a more mentally healthy team culture? And number two, as a manager, it's super easy to focus on supporting your team and forget about your own well-being, right? What are some practical ways managers can take care of their own mental health?
Yeah. Okay, let me touch on that first one.
Yeah.
As a manager, and there is no perfect manager out there, right? There is no perfect way to handle this because the humanness of everybody is also unique, right? And so depending on your team structure. I think so. I lead a team of right now client success managers, sales folks where the performance is, is what, like, huge, right? Like, your job is about performing, right? Like the growth, like making sure clients are the best. And it's very much a performance culture, right? That's the nature of the job. And right, we are all human, right? And so if performance is the only thing we're paying attention to, metrics, KPIs, right, getting to that next level, that could foster a sense of unsafeness, right? Like when you are struggling, when you haven't performed, when your last month your numbers were up here and this month your numbers are right here, right? Is being able to have a space to talk and to feel like you're part of a team and that we're in this together, checking in on a person on an individual level, right? And not just about their performance, but have one-on-ones and say, like, tell me about what's going on in your life. You just had a baby a couple of months ago. How is that going? You just, making sure that you're not just focused on the performance, but you're focused on the full humanness of the person that you're managing. I think that's huge. And creating, spaces for them to connect with their colleagues as well, right? I think, Tati, you're really good at that within Job City, is creating spaces where it's not a meeting, right? It's not about like what we've accomplished this week, right? Let's connect over coffee, a virtual coffee, and talk about how we're doing. And I think that's important, and probably even more important when we don't have a physical office space where we can just go to the office, the water cooler, or take people out to lunch, right? That we have to create spaces like that when we work remotely. For the leaders,
sometimes asking people how they are, right? But like a genuine question, like, hey, Jenna, how are you? I heard that you fell and you hurt your elbow. Are you okay? Does it hurt? Like, those things show other people that you really care.
Yeah.
And it's not just, hey, Jenna, I need this from you. Hey, Jenna, I require this, this report by this specific date and time, right? It's like, it's balancing those things, but like in a genuine manner, not so that it doesn't sound fake, right? But like, we do need to consider that, people are going through difficult situations, perhaps, a difficult financial situation, a difficult relationship, or, we don't see what everybody's going through, right? So we have to be kind to one another, right? We got to be understanding. Of course, we have to understand that we are in a work environment, right?
Yeah.
But we need to show that we are empathetic, right?
Yeah, I think creating a culture for your team, and this comes from all levels, and you don't necessarily have to be the manager or the director or the chief, right? To be able to do this, it could be your first week on the job, right? And you could still help to create a culture of safety in the workplace by how you interact with others. And safety, again, when we think of safety, it's like, oh, well, like nobody's, bullying somebody, right? That's part of safety, but also safety is like somebody being able to raise their hand and saying, I'm having a hard day, or I just worked for 6 months to close a client and it didn't close. Right. And I feel like a failure right now, but being able to talk and be open about our struggles, I think, is a way to create a healthy, safe environment. And everybody's, job is a little bit different, but being able to like say, hey, I'm really struggling. Like, this is really hard. I need some help. Has anybody gone through this before? Anybody have thoughts, advice? And creating that space for each other. And then as managers, Tati, I think probably the like impactful thing that I've had when I've had managers that I'm like, wow, is when they are able to say, hey, like, I'm human and I struggle too, right? Or even being able to like apologize. Let's say maybe you are a manager and there was an issue within like your team, and you were stressed, and you went in and you kind of all guns blazing, and you kind of like just, what were you doing? What were you thinking? Right? And you step back and you're like, whoa, like I just came on that person really strong, really hard, right? We all have bad days. We've all done that. It's what happens next that I think creates trust and safety within the people you're managing, right? And so being able to go and say, hey, I know I came down on you really hard yesterday. And I just want to say that I think that I overstepped. I don't think that you deserved the way I spoke to you. I want to talk about, one, I want to apologize to you. And two, I want to talk about how I could support you better so that we can work together to like change this scenario, work on this goal. So the people in my life that have been able to, show their vulnerability as managers has been huge. Not just in, hey, like I get mental health help, but hey, I made a mistake. Managers are going to make mistakes, probably more mistakes than anybody else, right? Because it's a lot of work to manage a team. And then for the manager to be able to seek out other people, right, to support them. Sometimes, when you're the CEO or, the Pope, right, or the president or there's not many peers, right, in the workplace. So seeking out other CEOs. It's hard
It's
to
very being a
really
CEO, being a VP, being a leader is quite lonely, right? So
it can be.
yeah, so that's why I asked you how they could actually take care of themselves, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes they forget to do that.
Often. It's very common for even if you're the best manager in the world and you're always checking in on your people, right, to take the same things into practice, to be able to be vulnerable, to be able to say, hey, I need to get some help, I need my bedtime routine, to be able to say, hey, I need to find people maybe outside of my workplace, maybe not inside my workplace. I belong to a few different communities, right, of women in business, women in technology. A lot of that's about networking, but what I've realized is actually it's a wonderful space for me to connect and share struggles, right, that are outside of my workplace, but with women who are in professional settings and the technology field, and seeking those things out has been an important thing for me. And then reminding the other people, like for me, that like that, hey, sometimes let's just, let's not talk about work right now. Let's just check in on each other.
Yeah. The simple things that make a big difference. Okay, Jenna, I don't have any other questions for now. Let's move on to our chat and see if we have any comments or questions. Well, they just graded. Oh, Josh said he just said men also cry.
Yes, they do.
Of course. Well, no, we don't have any other questions or comments. Jenna, thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your insights, and for busting so many myths out there, right?
Yeah.
Any final words before we leave?
I just think it would be important, right, if anybody, within Job City or within our network, right, outside of Job City, if you are struggling and you just don't know where to look for a therapist, or, how to navigate a conversation with your general practitioner or a psychiatrist about what medicine might be available that could be helpful to you, let us know, and we can help you navigate those conversations, those difficult conversations, without any judgment, without, any fear of any kind of repercussions within the workplace. I think that that's really important.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jenna.
Mhm.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. And, a special message to our job citizens. If you guys require any assistance, let us know through your People Experience Partner, aka PEP. They will, of course, support you. And you can also come to me, right? We're just a Slack away. So, guys, thank you so much for joining. Bye-bye. Thank you, Jenna.
Bye, Tati. Thank you.